I found out about Karen was going to be at this conference. Well, of course, John did. John told me, you know, John Peterson. He was like, Krista, did you know? I'm like, no! He said you should contact her. And I have been blessed. You've got it, Dongo. Okay, good. And so we were lucky enough that she said yes. And I'm really pleased about the array of speakers. I don't know if you're noticing, but we've got informal science, we've got the national standards, we've got been there, done that, where have we been? And then we've got this idea of literacy. Now this is kind of a little piece that I really like, and Rich probably will tell you. I really have, not that I can't teach literacy, but I love using textbooks and science fiction books and things like that to get across ideas of the nature of science and science in general. And so I'm really happy that she's going to come in and speak about science literacy. And of course, of course, you may be taking it as the future. But anyway. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Krista. I'm just delighted to be here. Sorry about the little glitch in my schedule, but here I am, and I'm going to talk about building the scaffolding for 21st century science literacy. All right, kind of show me by looking at me and nodding your heads. Do you want students who are able to appreciate the beauty and wonder of science? Yeah, I see those heads going there. We all want that to happen. How about students that possess sufficient knowledge of science and engineering that they can engage in public discussions on issues? Do we want them to be careful consumers of scientific and technological information related to their everyday lives? Can they make judgments about it and use those things that are going to benefit them? Do we want them not only to learn in our classes, but actually go beyond our classes and keep on learning outside the school? And do we want them to acquire the skills so that they will be able to go into a career of their choice? Whether or not it is strictly math or science, I can guarantee you in every field you do need to use some math and science in every single field. You can throw anyone out, even cooking. Science is really important in that. Actually, these are, well, first of all, is your science program, is it accomplishing all those goals? Those goals are actually the goals that are in the framework for K-12 science education. How many of you have seen that document? Oh, all right. I'd say about half of you have actually seen this document. It is free. It is online, so you can just download it to your computer. So this document is the foundation for, as Jim was talking about, the next generation science standards. Now you might say, well, maybe it's not important to me because we are not going to be adopting those next generation science standards. But you can really strengthen your Nebraska science standards by integrating some of the ideas that are in this document. So whether or not you're adopting or not, I think you'd find it very useful. As I said, it's free. You can just download it. It was the document that was used as the foundation to develop the next generation science standards. Now, the reason that these are unique and have a new idea is because they're integrating three areas. What they call the scientific and engineering practices, cross-cutting concepts, and core disciplinary ideas. And so I'm going to go through a model to show you what they're doing to integrate those things. All right, the theme of my presidency is build the scaffolding for 21st century science literacy. These documents can help us do that. Let's see how that happens. How many of you have seen that video, Shift Happens? You seen that? Again, you can go on YouTube. It's one of those things I think a lot of us have taken a look at. But I pulled this quote from that video. We are currently preparing students for jobs that don't yet exist, using technologies that haven't been invented, in order to solve problems that we don't even know are problems yet. And so that's our challenge. you know, when I grew up, there really was no computer, and now look at us, we're just all very dependent on it. So I like to use that quote when I talk about the 21st century skills. So what are they? What do we really need to be teaching our students to be scientifically literate? Well, we need to teach them to be critical thinkers. So jobs are really going to be kind of done by robots, things that are menial, that you do over and over, things like that. We need the people that can think about, if something's not working right, what do I do to make it work right? So they have to do problem solving. So critical thinking and problem solving. Communication is becoming more and more important to be a wise consumer of information, and also to effectively give out information too, to communicate information. Collaboration is critical, working with other people and doing it effectively. And creativity. And the last one is probably the most important one, and that's innovation. So these are what we agree upon are the things that our students are going to need to know to be successful, to be scientifically literate in the 21st century. And what strikes you about them? Do you see any content there? They're all thinking skills, aren't they? All right, so how do we go about doing this? Well, I'm going to use an analogy. And the analogy is constructing a building to show how we can put the ideas together that are in the framework, which is the foundation for the next generation science standards. So we'll go through this model. Well, if we're going to build something, the first thing we need are some what? Tools. That's right. So you saw my tool person there. And those are the scientific and engineering practices. Things like asking questions in science and defining problems in engineering. Developing and using models in both science and engineering. Planning and carrying out investigations, both fields. Analyzing and interpreting data. Using mathematics and computational thinking. And then in science, constructing explanations, and in engineering, designing solutions. Engaging in argument from evidence, and lastly, obtaining, evaluating, and communicating information. So these are the practices. Now, what are we used to seeing? When we say inquiry, what kind of skills do you usually think about? The process skills of inquiry, remember those? The process skills of inquiry. So why did they change it? Did they just want to throw us off? Or what here? You know, we just got down the process skills of inquiry, and now they're talking to us about practices. So why practices? Well, they want to make sure that learning and doing go together, that you use these skills to learn the science. Often the process skills of inquiry were taught in isolation. Today we're going to learn to classify, but it wasn't necessarily to get the content from doing that classification. So it's to show that they are together. Secondly, if you do something repeatedly, you become proficient, like learning to play a musical instrument. You have to practice that musical instrument. So that's another meaning of the word practices, that we want to do it repeatedly and become proficient, because that's how we're going to gain knowledge of science, through using these practices. And then learning it so thoroughly that it becomes second nature. I know when I get in the car, I don't have to think about, now put the key in, turn it, you know, back up, put it in gear. It's just second nature to me now. All of you probably found that. You get somewhere and you don't even know how you got there. So that's another meaning of the word practices. And then using one's knowledge to meet an objective. All of you went through practice teaching. Okay, so that's why they changed from process skills of inquiry to using the term practices. They thought it was more representative of what they were trying to do in the new standards. Okay, so we've got our tools. Those are our scientific and engineering practices. Next, we've got to have some raw materials. And those raw materials, or the bricks, are the core disciplinary ideas. And the way it's written in the framework now, and I think Susan will agree with me, this might be subject to change here, is they list those core disciplinary ideas in physical science, life science, earth and space sciences. And then they have a fourth category, engineering, technology, and applications of science. But some people are saying maybe that's more of a cross-cutting concept, which we'll talk about next. So the raw materials are drawn from those areas, but they are the big ideas, not all of the little tiny facts. Now all the little details are so accessible to us. We can do Google searches and the like. We can be able to judge the material, make sure it's accurate. But we need to know where to go to find that information. So we need the big ideas about science, and we can get all the little details. For a long time, there was this struggle, and I like to think of the struggle in terms of a boat. And people would say, what's important is we have to teach the process skills of inquiry. So everyone would run to one side of the boat and teach the process skills of inquiry. Well, what happened to the boat? It kind of sinks. And then they say, no, they're not learning enough content we got, so they all run to the other side of the boat. And then we sink that way. So what we're trying to get between content and inquiry, or practices as they're now called, is a balance. We want to balance that boat. But we want to add more to it, and those are the cross-cutting concepts. And think of that as the mortar. That's what holds everything together. So these are the cross-cutting concepts, and you see them if you look at some of the documents that Jim mentioned. So things like patterns, cause and effect, scale, proportion, and quantity, systems and system models, energy and matter, structure and function, stability and change. So those have been themes that have gone through some of the preceding documents. They always say that you build on the shoulders of giants, and that's what this has done too. You can think of the cross-cutting concepts as actually being the learning goals for science literacy. That it's a way of thinking about it. It's a way of classifying or making filing cabinets in your mind. So you have ways to store the information. They say that everything we've ever learned is really up there, but we don't have the retrieval system to get it back out again. So those cross-cutting concepts help us with that retrieval system. If we file them away under, oh, that's a system, and systems work like this. They're interconnected. One part affects another part. So it helps us understand them. All right, so those are the three dimensions. So the tools are the scientific and engineering practices. The bricks are the core disciplinary ideas. And the mortar are those cross-cutting concepts that you just saw. So standards. I know that you will not be adopting them, but as you look at your standards too, what is a standard and what isn't it? Well, in the next generation science standards, standards are performance expectations, and they pull from all three areas. So the practices, the cross-cutting concepts, and the core disciplinary ideas. So they include all three of those. Now, what aren't they? Well, standards are not curriculum and instructional materials. Materials are developed, instruction is developed from it, but that's not what standards are. Teacher and administrator development. It is not professional development. Assessment and accountability. They are performance expectations. And organizational issues like, when should I teach magnetism? What grade level? Should I repeat it in other grade levels? All of those decisions really are up to you. So we start with the basic document, which was developed by the National Research Council. That's being used to develop the next generation science standards through ACHIEVE in partnership with the National Science Teachers Association. And all of those things that I mentioned, guess who's responsible for those? You are. So you use them as a guide. So here we see a little, I love analogies, of kind of yarn all braided together to show that it really needs to be integrated. They are not taught in isolation, so we need to integrate them. Now, how do we put that scaffolding in place to build science literacy? Again, I'm going to use the analogy of a building. We should start with Explore. And during Explore, we assess our students' prior knowledge, and if they're lacking in that area, we need to do something to build their background knowledge. So that forms the foundation. Then we go to a directed inquiry. And in directed inquiry, we model the inquiry process. How are students ever going to know how to do it if they've never seen it modeled? So this is a critical step in teaching students how to integrate all three of those dimensions. We've got to model how you do it during a directed inquiry. After it's been modeled, then we give students a chance to practice it, and that's a guided inquiry. So now students can practice those skills that have been modeled for them. Then we give them a chance to ask and answer their own questions. And I call it connected because usually questions come up from the Explore or the directed or the guided inquiry. They say good inquiry is where two questions grow where there was only one. And finally, if we have provided that scaffolding, we let them explore, then we do a directed inquiry to model the inquiry process, we let them practice and guide it, we give them a little more freedom and connect them to ask and answer a question. They should be ready to conduct their own full or open inquiry. So that's the scaffolding that we can put in place. I'm doing a presentation tonight where I actually do a lesson and go through this in more detail. All right, any questions or comments?
Would you just talk a little bit more about the connected? You go from guided to connected.
Yes, I call it connected because it connects to a previous inquiry. After doing an inquiry, it's good to ask students what are the questions they have. And so you can go through a process of selecting one of the questions they came up with. So you usually have to get them to refine the question. And that's a whole workshop in itself to show students how to do that. So connected connects to questions that came up during the Explore or the directed or the guided. So you choose one. And then again, it's more practice. Other questions? Okay, hopefully if you come tonight, you'll see this in action, where I'll actually go through a lesson and you'll be able to do it with me.